Here, Dave Demarest, retired, semi-retired in '07, but head coach for 34 seasons at LaQuinta, and then winningest coach in Orange County history still with 753 wins, but 15 consecutive Leaf championships, and then 3 CIF championships. So, Dave, thanks for jumping on with me.
It's my pleasure.
How does somebody go their entire college career without making an error?
Yeah, you know what? That's not kind of a claim to fame, and I, I tell people that I didn't even realize it till my senior year, which was 1972, and it was the only year that we weren't very good, and this got to be the big topic with about a month ago in the season, which um, I don't know. It didn't happen. I enjoyed playing center field. I always give my high school coach credit because my sophomore year I was the shortstop on varsity, and when I came out after basketball, he told me he was putting me in center, and he kind of gave me the you're fast, you're a good athlete. I need you out there, but I kid people now. I tell them the truth that we had a better third baseman, shortstop, second, and first. So I got moved out there, but it was
At least he
probably
was smart enough to lie to you.
I had to do. I actually, sadly, I did his eulogy, and I told that story, and at the time, I was kind of like an outfield. I'd always grown up being the pitcher and shortstop, and if I wouldn't have made that move, probably wouldn't have had the college career I had, and yeah, the defensive part. It's one record that can't be broken. At
Yeah, for
least.
sure, for sure. I mean, it's amazing to me. Like not one muffed ground ball or drop a fly ball, which happens, or miss a cut sometimes. It's amazing to me that like you didn't have at least one instance in 3 years where that happened.
Well, there was our second to last road trip up in San Jose State. After the Friday night game, we had a abundance of guys out past curfew, and it was our entire infield. And so the next day, we actually for pregame and stuff, we actually had a tryout, and I ended up playing third. The shortstop was a pitcher, the second baseman was a pitcher, and the right fielder was and the first baseman was our right fielder. And I didn't even think about it till later on. The first ground ball to me, I bobbled, stepped on it, picked it up, and our first baseman dug it out of the dirt. And he lives in Palos Verdes where I grew up, and we ended up teaching at LaQuinta High School together. And I always give him the credit. And I didn't realize that I could have made an error, even though it was at third. I thought later, boy, that was the dumbest thing I ever did. Willing to play
Hey, walk
third.
that back. How were the tryouts before the game, and when did you guys realize like, hey, the a lot of the team suspended, so what are we going to do to fill a lineup out here?
Well, as I said, we were having a pretty tough year, and I was having, it's one of those where I learned it's better to have an average year and a good year team wise, because I was having an All American year, and the team wasn't. So athletically, um, you know, he just said, "Does somebody want to play infield?" And I excited, because the year had been a long year. And so we ended up having a pitcher at short, pitcher at second, our right fielder at first, and I played third because our entire infield was suspended. And
Did you guys win?
um, no, I think we lost a doubleheader, and yeah, it was. I didn't really even realize it till later, and somebody pointed it out, and I didn't get a. I think when I knew a right-hander, was swinging late, I played the line. When I thought it was a pull hitter, I shied away after the first ball, thinking, "Hey, this is crazy." And the funny thing is, I never wore a cup in the outfield. So I had to wear a cup, and every time I came in the dugout, I had to take it out because I was not used to
Yeah, you're
it.
not going to hit with one of those in if you haven't hit with one in.
Oh my
I was the
gosh! So
opposite
yeah,
because I had to do a little bit of both, but because I had worn a cup my entire life, I actually still wore a cup when I played the outfield, even though I had no business wearing one. I was just comfortable with one in.
yeah. Well, it was the last time I, or played infield. But yeah, it was interesting, and
And you were an
yeah, that's
academic All-American that year.
yes, I was.
You know, and
Um,
for you, you carried that over into your coaching side too. And how much of an influence was that on your players you started to coach because you were such a good student?
well, Ryan, what's kind of funny is I was a center fielder at Long Beach State in '72, and I was the head coach and teaching math in '73. I didn't, gradually like assistant freshman coach or head freshman coach and assistant varsity. And what's interesting about that academic part, I kind of always looked at academics like I did sports. I didn't want to get below a B. I mean, it was like C was like hitting 200 or something. So um, was I great studying? And I just was very competitive in the classroom. And so when I took the coaching job, boy, you're talking about, out there on an island, and I had no background. And I looked at my high school coaches, two basketball, two baseball. They had different philosophies, but they all were great communicators, and they really made kids accountable. And when I started coaching, um, to learn the game as far as teaching it, those were kind of my two go-tos where, no matter how we're going to do, how soon I'm going to become a better coach, we're going to have communication, and they're going to be accountable. And that counted the classroom. And one of the things I'm really, really proud of, which doesn't get mentioned too much, is at the end of 34 years, we never had a kid ineligible, and we never had a kid not graduate. And in high school, that's not easy.
I appreciate that. When as I'm doing research and all of that, that was one of the things that popped out to me is that you didn't have a kid ineligible in 34 years. And I mean, how were you keeping kids accountable at that point for going to class?
Well, I mean, it's so funny. I think how I handled coaching the first 10 years, the middle 10 years, and the last 14. But since I was in the classroom, which people go, you didn't do PE? No, I was in math. I really liked being indoors. And as I got to know the teachers, I kind of, I mean, there's some teachers that want to write a note every month on someone. I basically said, if you got a problem with one of my players in the classroom, pick up the phone and call my classroom, and I'll take care of it. Um, Also, I was very fortunate because one of my fraternity brothers from Long Beach State ended up being the head counselor at LaQuinta High School. And so Fred Johnson was on top of everything. If there was a kid that was probably in a class over his head or a problem, I knew about it. And I don't know, it was really important to me. We had a breakfast club. Um, to be eligible, you had to have a 2.0, but if you were below a 2.5 at any quarter, you had the breakfast club. And it's
What'd you
like
do
our
for Breakfast
standards of,
Club? So I know there's a lot of different ways to do this. So, as a kid that's in Breakfast Club, what'd they have to do?
well, instead of being at school at 8, they had to be there at 7. So
Was it a study
it's
hall?
some. Oh yeah, it was a study hall, and it was to where, I found that sometimes yelling and running kids, there's that time you do that, but when you take something away from them, like an hour in the morning, or you don't play them in a game, you get a much better response because kids can be yelled at and they can run, and it's like, oh well, and they'll do it again.
It also
But
shows that you care too. I mean, I know not everybody thinks about that in that way now, but I think it shows that you actually care about the human being.
it's that communication part, and that's what all my coaches. I went through it, and I appreciated it. And even though maybe I was the better player most of the time, there was times I sat. Um, there was times that I got yelled at. Like I said, my four coaches. I had a baseball coach that had knowledge, one that was a father figure. I had a basketball coach that was Mr. Organization, and one that was very disciplinary and liked to yell. But they all had the two things in common. I mean, they communicated in their own way, and they made everybody from the top player to the bottom player accountable. And I thought that was so important. And um, um, I found that you get more of an effort when you take something away, not just kind of a yell or run type deal.
Do you feel
Um,
like you had your coaching voice right away when you get thrown right into being a head coach? Do you feel like you had it right
ah,
away?
no, I tell you what, the two things I tell you about communication and accountability. The late Mike Gillespie and I were very close. I played at Palos Verdes High. He was coach at Rolling Hills High. And so I knew Mike, and also a gentleman named Mike Main, who was at Orange Coast College. His son, Brent Main, played like 15 years in the major leagues. They were kind of two mentors for me. And a lot of times in coaching, you look back on how you did things. And the third thing that's important in coaching is everybody has talent. It's just what is that level? And I realized the first 10 years I had good talent. The second 10, I had great talent. And the last 14, I had elite talent. So I always had the talent to compete, but I never changed those, rules for that top pitcher or that top shortstop. Everybody makes a mistake. Maybe everybody's late once. Um, but the communication deal is really important, and I see that in high school now. It's so different. Um, a kid couldn't come up to me on Thursday in the fall and say, "Coach, I can't play Saturday." I mean, why? Well, why didn't you tell me 2 weeks ago? And they do that, and it's like coaches nowadays are so afraid to. Okay, well, you're going to sit. Next thing you know, the kid's transferring. So, and we had a strict haircut facial rule that people said, "How can you do
I
that?"
played
I
with
said,
that
"Well,
too. Those are the guys that I played
yeah,
for. Same thing.
we because I went through it my sophomore year at Palos Verdes High. Our basketball coach got this thing about we're going to have butches, and it took me about 3 haircuts before I had that butch,
You definitely
and then
can't do
after
that
that,
now.
yeah, after that, and well, I had that question thrown at me,
I
and when you're
stopped paying
winning,
attention to it at the end because it was too much to even worry about or get into, and it's changed. Like we would have certain things like the neckline, they could grow it out, but it had to be,
yeah.
fairly clean if they grew it out. And, I think there's ways now that you can still have some of that accountability with, okay, if you want to grow a beard out, just keep your neckline clean because that's even more of a pain than it is just letting it go.
It is. Our situation was, say, we're talking back in the 80s, 90s,
Yeah.
whatever, and kind of got funny now. It wasn't that way in the summer, fall, winter. It was for the season, and you cannot believe, Brian, how many parents would come up to me in January and go, "Oh, coach, I can't wait for the season to start so that Joey gets a haircut." And this, I'm thinking, "Holy cow, you can't control that."
Nope.
And it was one of those people said, "Why?" And I went through it, and then it's like, because I want to know if I tell them to do something, they're going to do it.
They're
Now, someone
invested.
said, "What happens if someone didn't do it?" I said, "I can't. I make out the lineup, but it never got to that point. It was kind of a tradition, um, which you can't do now." You're right. You're exactly right.
My dad's big, and you never realize it as a player. My dad's big one was shower before breakfast when you came down when you were on the road, and then when you start to coach, you realize he did that, so he knew guys were actually getting up and showering and trying to get prepared to go play.
that's like I tell people a story. I was very fortunate. Youth league, high school, and college. Um, my mom never brought me a drink and sandwich in the middle of a game. So if I didn't eat before the game or after it, that was my problem. Nowadays it's, gosh, I've helped some people with their little league teams and this and that, and it's like, oh my gosh. I said, these these
It's a
moms.
whole event now.
Yeah,
It's a whole event.
it's that, and I had the dad that was Mr. Positive about umps, coaches, players, both teams, and nowadays but it's all different. We know that. I mean, the time and money they put into their kids, they want to, and what they've been told about them, it's a whole different world.
Yeah, it is. Do you feel like baseball's changed much in California? I know you're still doing it. I mean, you're still in it right now.
Right.
Do you feel like it's changed much?
Well, here's what you got. I mean, I went and watched Huntington Beach High and Edison High. Huntington Beach is a very, very powerful program. Edison High is right near my house, and I went over and watched, and a bunch of scouts and people, and the kids are bigger, stronger. Um, they're more polished. They know the game, but they put that time in. Ryan, I don't know if I trade my time with the kids today, because I mean, I played all the sports in youth sports in high school, the basketball, baseball, but we were seasonal as far as, especially our youth sports. The organization was seasonal: football, basketball, baseball, even boxed a little. And during baseball in youth leagues, I wasn't playing football and basketball, except maybe to play or a pickup game or something. These guys are 24/7 year-round baseball, or I talk to my friends that are youth and their kids are playing basketball, baseball, soccer, and organized. And
I think about this too sometimes. I think, the kids are specializing, but the coaches now are specializing too. I mean, I remember I had the same coach for multiple sports growing up. So I think that kind of separated the seasons out too, because one person can't cover basketball, football the same season. I think that's why some of the season stuff has changed too, because you have kids specializing, but you also have coaches that are specializing now, doing it the whole year.
exactly. Well, the travel ball showcases and private lessons, people are making a living off of it. And
And there's
so
nothing wrong
I
with that.
actually, the mid 80s,
There's nothing wrong with that.
yeah, the mid 80s, um, myself and 4 or 5 other high school coaches started the area code games out here to actually have area code competition. And then the organizers saw that, hey, we can make money off this. And it became now at Blair Field in Long Beach. And then travel ball and private lessons were just kind of on the side for a coach. But now it's their livelihood, and there's good ones. And if a kid decides to go that way and not the parent making that decision, that's fine. But I think playing multiple sports, especially youth league and high school, I think it's really important. But
Hey, back that up though. You started the area code games, which obviously
yep.
that's a great drop in. So, I mean, what was the emphasis of that for you guys that we need to start this thing? Because obviously it's a national thing now, but why did you guys decide to start the area code games?
Well, Jack Hodges, who was the coach at Laguna Hillside and later Saddleback College, started it, and Bobby Ikes and Rich Graves and myself, a couple others, we helped with the 714, and it actually was 714-213-805, and we met in Lodi, California, which is halfway, and we did it for a couple of years, and then we did it down at San Diego State, and next thing you know, I mean, I was doing the 714 in San Diego, and it's like, hey, we have this kid from Nevada, big time high school player that we want to include. And next thing you know, it's like, okay, we're 714, but we have this player. And then I can't think of his first name. His last name was Williams, who ran the whole thing. He moved it to Blair Field, and it became a huge event. And next thing you know, it was the rookie scout teams and teams from Texas and Arizona. And now it's all across the country with your perfect games and all that. And actually,
and they started small too. I mean, I think any of the good companies out there or any of the good events, it started small and then eventually got bigger.
Yeah, and it's I even myself, we took our high school team to Europe in '78. No one had done that. We played in the Netherlands, Germany, Italy. And the next thing you know, in '79, I'm coaching over in Sweden, actually one of their teams in Stockholm. And then I ended up doing like the Super 7 Series in East Cobb, the Sun Belt Classic in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the National High School Game, the second one in Aberdeen, Baltimore, and then I did. I coached Connie Mack baseball 25 years, and we went to the College World Series 10 times. And Farmington is like the most hospitable city in the world. I did the USA 18 and under down in Mexico, the World Games in '92, the Olympic Festival in '91. So I started to branch out coaching wise, and I loved it, but all those were not available in the '80s, '70s, any of that.
Yeah, it's grown so much. By the way, it's gonna be a banner year for California for the ABCA Hall of Fame this year.
Well, it's I
Some of them are
actually went to,
holdovers, but it still counts. It
well,
actually
you know
kind of
what?
worked out. It worked out great actually that those guys missed last year and they're coming this year.
I actually went to Chicago last year to honor those guys. I did. I went. I help out at different schools and levels, and Fountain Valley coaches were going. Coach, why don't you go? We'll pay for it. I went back to Chicago, froze my butt off, but it was like I get there, and I'm going to the dinner, and of course they didn't have the meal, as you know. But next thing you know, the flight that the Alta Belly group took from Orange County to Denver is what we were going to take, but we ended up going Long Beach straight into Chicago. So the Alta Belly group never got there, and then I find out that George Horton got COVID, so Donnie Sten didn't show it. I'm sitting there with Scott Pickler. I'm going, I'm here to kind of honor those guys. So when I found out I was going in, and they were being honored this year, that kind of is a like cherry on top. Yeah, I mean I told Matt West, I said you need to contact the Orange County Register and the Orange County Sports Zone, and hopefully we can get a picture with four of us because different levels too. Yeah. So yeah.
Speaking of Scott Pickler, I mean you helped him coach for a little bit, didn't you, at Cypress?
Yeah,
all roads lead back to Coach Pickler, don't they?
Well, I always kid Scott. I two of my tough CIF losses, like 82, 83, he was at Loera High. And so he always bugged me if I ever got out of LaQuinta to come over and help him. And so when I got out of teaching and coaching, I got out of both at the same time. He was back in the Cape, and I hadn't really talked to him, and everybody's going, well, what are you going to do? I said, right now I'm just taking time off. So finally, it was like August, Scott called. He goes, hey, I want you over here right now. And I went over there. I didn't even get to say no, maybe. It was like, here's this, here's that. And I helped him full time 2 years. And it was funny because the first year he goes, I want you to do this. I go, Scott, I just want to be Don Zimmer without the helmet the first year. And then the second year I coached first, and I took the outfielders, and I put some stuff in that, Bill Pinkham told me Scott isn't always flexible, second, third offense and stuff like that. And I did it 2 years. And a good friend of mine who was coaching at Fountain Valley High, he ran into his brother was going through some cancer, and his wife was, and he had to step down. So an old friend of mine, Ron LaRufa, who used to be at Fountain Valley, called and said, hey, you want to do this a year? I did that a year, and then an ex-player of mine down in San Diego, Vista High School, ran into the perfect storm, a bad administrator, bad parents, and some bad kids. And I went down there, which was a little dry, but I enjoyed it, and then went back to Scott when I was done with that, and then Fountain Valley a couple more years. And after 8 years of full-time assistant, now I spend time at different levels. I find my ex-players now's kids are at that age. I may go to a 4-year school, a high school, second, third offense, first and third defense, bunt defense.
Any age group that you've enjoyed more, or is it just fun being on the field with any age group?
It's different. It's usually when I go to a 4-year school or a JC now, it's just to put in some system, something that I did that was successful. The Little League, any youth ball, I enjoy that because the kids, even though their attention span isn't as wide, they enjoy it. They get more out of it per se. They're there just to have fun. you hit a travel team, now you get more of the kid that's looking to advance. So they all have their pluses and minuses, but I find a lot. And I did the same thing once I got out of playing, I would go back, to my coaches and ask for this and that. And so now I have a lot of my players that will, it's crazy sometimes. They got their six and under Suns team that's going to the Little League World Series in Simi Valley, and you just okay, it's fun.
Yeah, I think that's the human journey piece is, you're at this age and you're trying to get things going, but then you get to a certain age where now it's your time to give back in any way possible to give back.
Oh, yeah, it is. It's, people ask me, I go, well, I did it backwards. I had 34 years as the head coach, 8 years of full assistant. And now I've had 8 years, which is a total of 50 of helping because I'm available. Plus I get to go see games I want to see. I might have a college coach out of state say, hey, can you go see this kid? And I enjoy doing that, less pressure and gives me flexible to do other things. But yeah, it's all rewarding. And like I said, the baseball coaching deal, I got to coach in Australia, Sweden, the Europes, the Mexico, and everything's centered around LaQuinta High School. But starting out as a head coach the year after you play, I was fortunate to have talent, different levels of talent, but we always had
and to
talent.
keep your job too. That doesn't always happen for guys when they get something that, not that you weren't ready, but a lot of guys in baseball have gotten run out because they've gotten something too quick.
Well, the funny story is I finished at Long Beach State and I had worked in the summer camp, the 49er camp, and the head of the athletic department, Tom Morgan, I had finished, and there was a little open door for me. Mike Scoba, the old Fullerton coach, head scout for Oakland, had a plane ticket if I wanted to go to low A. I kid people, I told him I couldn't afford the plane ticket. But Tom says to me one day, hey, Dave, would you want to start teaching coaching? I never really thought of it. I just was always playing. And I said, what do you got? He says, well, I know the principal at LaQuinta High in Orange County. Well, Orange County to me, there was Disneyland because I was on the west, right by the ocean, Palos Verdes, Long Beach State. So I went, interviewed, and at the interview, he didn't say anything about baseball. He just asked me what I could coach. I told him the right answer, anything he wanted me to. Went back to 49er camp. Tom Morgan asked me how it went. He said, I have the math job. He said, did he tell you about the baseball? I go, what? Well, they're looking for a baseball coach. I called that principal. He said, Dave, let's take this job and I'll keep the baseball until November, see how things go in the classroom. And he walked in November and said, you're the head baseball coach. So when people ask me, how did I become a head coach at 23 right out of college? I said, well, I really didn't try. It just happened that somebody knew somebody and that was it.
I think that's how it works for most people in the beginning. Yeah, somebody's got to help that. They got to push that door open for you, and you've got to do a good job when you get the job. But that's how we all got in. Is somebody's going to give you an opportunity, and then you have to go do a good job with it.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that being in the right place at the right time? And if it didn't happen, or and then I went to a school that was in a very athletic area at the time. It's a whole different demographics now, but so. I mean, like I said, when I looked at the talent I had then, the second 10 years, and then the last 14 years, 98, we go to the finals and I've got Bobby Crosby and Gerald Laird. And then this is unbelievable. And you never know until later. In 2003, we go to Angel Stadium. And on that team, I had Ian Kennedy, Ian Stewart, Brandon Laird, who played with the Yankees, Houston's been over in Japan, and kid Cole Gardner that had a cup of coffee. So I had 4 major leaguers. And what people will talk about LaQuinta, in our 34 years, we averaged only 13, 14 players a year.
Crazy.
Yeah. When people go, we play teams with 25. I don't know how coaches did it.
Is that by design for you or just enrollment?
Well, what basically is like in the 70s and 80s, And up to 95, you had to live in between the white picket fences. And it was a very athletic area, but multiple sports. And I mean, everybody was good. I mean, now in Orange County, you got 4 or 5 teams. Before you had 20 top teams. Okay. Then it looked like the rest of our sports were, because we became kind of the demographics were the Asians, which are great students, but not athletic. And CIF, our governing body, went to open enrollment. So we lost kids that were football, basketball, but anybody in the district, such as Bobby Crosby, Gerald Laird, Ian Kennedy, Ian Stewart, they came to our school. But tryouts, we maybe have 10, 15 kids try out in the school. But we were, I guess you could say, we were quality and not quantity. Now, like the 03 team had 18 players, but I had 3 or 4 years where I only had 11 players. It's and people don't believe me until you ask Donnie.
That's hard
Sten,
for me to believe. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's 13.5. I think I figured it out. I got all the team pictures in my garage. So,
hey, you kind of described yourself as a perfectionist, and you say
exactly.
only won it 3 times in 34 years, but I mean, does that show how hard it is to win the CIF?
CIF is very difficult in Southern California. I told you I helped my ex-player down in San Diego, and they have a double elimination tournament. Well, they're Ryan, the southern section is so big that when you go to the playoffs, there's 32 teams and 4 seeded. Well, I could be one of the top seeds, and I win the first game at home, and I play a team 2 hours away, and they win the coin flip, and I got to go to them. Yep. So it's not – so you have got to win from 32 down to 2, single elimination. And baseball is very difficult because even
anything can happen.
Exactly. I can run into you. You've got a stud pitcher, and we hit the ball at people. And I always felt the toughest round was the first round because we were always, a high seed. And I think from 93 to 07, we went to 6 finals and 4 semifinals, and we only lost in the first round once. We never lost the second round. And that was always an accomplishment, even though people go, and this, you have an established program when every time you lose, someone says, what happened?
Exactly.
I mean, that's I used to tell my kids that. I said, don't be a smart, but, basically the other team got 5 runs, we got 4, and the umpire game. I mean, but that's what you would hear. What happened? It's like, well, we just won 45 league games in a row. It's so I guess that tells you, hey, you must be pretty good, but it's, the game is tough to win.
You're driven as an athlete, you're driven as a student, and you get a head coaching gig early. How difficult was it for you to deal with kids that maybe didn't have that same drive that you had?
I think if I look back, and you said the word, and I look at Scott Pickler, I look at Mike Gillespie, I look at Mike Main, people I was attracted to, I was a perfectionist. I remember I saw it more when I was helping Scott. You could score 5 runs and win the game in the 9th, or give up 5 and lose it. And the team would go out to, if you're at home, which was the first base dugout, to right field. Scott would go give congratulations to the other coaches, and we'd be out there talking to the kids. And Scott would walk up, okay, everybody on their jobs. Or, okay, let's get on the bus. And it's like, Scott, you just won the Empire. He just, it was next game. And sometimes, I can't say it'd be better if you didn't win all the time, because we try to win all the time. But expectations, they get pretty ridiculous. And I think you see it all throughout high school, college, professional sports. It's like people make changes and you go, gosh, the guys won. We won 78% of our games. So I can look at that like we lost 22%. But one of the best, I'll give you one of the best examples in '07. I had a tough time getting my kids motivated for league. And every time we won league, above our third base dugout fence, we had a blue circle for a league championship, red for a CIF finalist, and a white for a CIF champ. Well, from 91 through, or 90, yeah, 90 through '07, the only year we didn't win league was '92. So one day, the assistant from USC came out to look at a couple of our players, and our kids were stretching and playing catch down the line. And I was talking to him. He was on the infield, and I said, "Hey, let me go down, talk to the kids. I'll bring them down. Maybe you could talk to them a little bit before we start." So I go down there. Kids are stretching. I said, "Hey, we got a gentleman from USC coming. Pay no, we've had that before. Let's stretch out. Let's play catch, and then we'll go down and line up along the third base line, and he'll talk to you a little bit." So they do that, and kids come down and they take a knee on the third base line. So he's facing the fence. And I'd driven these kids about, you know what? Your expectations are higher. You get to live, on the team now that teams in the past developed, but you know what? You can't let up. So he looks at these kids, and the first thing out of his mouth is, he goes, "Wow, that's pretty impressive boards up there, but can I ask you something? What happened in '92?" And they looked, they were expecting him to go, "Guys, you guys just won 15 or 14." Or he looked and he picked out the fact, and the kids thought he was kidding, but I said, "No, guys, I'm telling you, that's the expectations they have. They expect you to win, and if you want to be known for something, don't win the league." And they kind of got the idea that, you got to go hard every game, and you're in a better place than if you won the league and they had a parade down Brookhurst Street for you.
You only get 5 minutes to thank everybody at the Hall of Fame. Is there anybody that you might not get to that you want to thank?
I've got to, we got to, it was funny because Don Sneddon told me about starting last year, and I noticed that in the program that there's a list of thank yous.
Yep.
That you get to put, but I'm probably going to hit from the very beginning is probably the coaches and players, and then the organization and my better half, Allison, and the fact that I'm going to be there because Scott Pickler put in a resume, and Jerry Stitt from University of Arizona and the late Mike Gillespie wrote very nice letters. And again, I think my whole life is being in the right place at the right time. And I tell you, we were kind of surprised when it came out in August. I mean, that's another thing. When I got the call in January, I was playing golf, and between the nines, I called Craig back, and he told me, I don't remember what I shot on the back nine. I was just elated. And then you can't say anything till August. Well, it comes out. And in the last few months, I had talked with Tim Saunders. Obviously, I knew Jerry Dawson and Eric. And, someone told me there had only been 32 high school coaches in the first 60 years. And there was 5 of us. Yeah. And
it's great for the game. And I think that's something we're continuing to drive forward as an organization, is making sure we are having representation in areas that we maybe haven't. And let's be honest, that's not where we started. In 1945, we started with 25 college coaches, and so obviously it's taken a little bit. But when you start to get the right voices in the room, then you're going to start to get some recognition in some areas that maybe we haven't had, which is a great thing for us and for baseball as a whole.
Yeah, I never heard, we had the National High School Baseball Coaches Association, much smaller, and, it's tough to run. But I always looked at the ABCA, even though the high percentage were members were high school, that's a college organization. And I understood. It wasn't like, well, gosh, how come him and not him? I just enjoyed going to it because I think it's one of the great events. I mean,
it's a celebration of the baseball industry and the coaching community, because we're not just baseball anymore. We have softball coaches as well, so it really is a celebration of coaching.
Well, I remember going to Chicago last year, and I thought, well, I've been to so many of these, and I wonder if it's going to be still. And it was just, I mean, I was floored by, the showcases and the speakers, the platform, and yeah, there wasn't dinner at the Hall of Fame, but just the whole project was just amazing. I mean, the effort you guys put in, and I looked at as a high school coach's advantage going there, listening to speakers and the Hall of Fame. That's a college, that's where college coaches are honored. For a high school coach, it's reaching the very top. But no, I was elated and looking forward to it.
Hey, I read people give you credit for being a really good in-game manager. Was that innate? Did you have that? I mean, you played the outfield mostly, and that you don't always see that with outfielders. But did you always have that innate ability to be good and think 2 steps ahead?
Well, that's the other part of the 10, 10, and 14. I can tell you, like the first 10 years, I had good talent, second, great talent, elite talent. Ryan, when I started out, I mean, I'd always been advanced, at that little league, playing on the majors, in high school, playing up with the big college. But to be also a high school coach with no background, luckily, and I didn't realize this till later, I was a visual learner. So, I mean, I was out and I was learning and watching. And like I said, Mike Main and the late Mike Gillespie and, gosh, just Orange
Those
County.
are 2 great ones to have, by the way.
Oh,
Especially
no.
Coach
And
Gillespie. For me, I think he was the smartest baseball coach we have.
And he was my rival coach in high school, and we always stayed close. And a lot of those Rolling Hills kids were my best friends. And he would say to me, Dave, if you played at Rolling Hills, we would have won a CF champion. I said, well, if you would have coached at Palos Verdes High, we would have won a CF champion. So that and this is something I'm always going to keep. His son told me the last letter he wrote for someone was mine. And when he got ill, I was just, and then passed. I know we're getting older, but I didn't see that. But I found out in coaching, when I first coached, I coached pitch by pitch, maybe out by out. And then maybe 10 years in, I would be in the first inning, but I could see the second and third. By the time the last 14, 15 years, I could see the whole game and the adjustments. And my preparation was always going in knowing that things don't always go the way you want. But it made a huge difference, and something I give to young coaches. It's the experience you have. Get out, see the better programs. If you have questions on something, ask. If something works against you, put it in your program. I mean, you learn by winning, losing. The talent level will dictate, as they say, nobody wins without talent. Not everybody wins with it. But I found that as I coached, that I could see further into the game before things happen. And, that doesn't always give you a win, but it sure makes a big difference. Yeah, it just, you're not a nervous wreck because, I'd lose.
I mean, do you think that's part of it too, with your experience, and then it does slow down for you because you have been in these situations before, so you can kind of see when something's maybe starting to brew just because you've been in the dugout for so long.
Well, I tell you, we had 2 tough semi losses my last 2 years. We go into the semis and we have our pitching staff. We have Brandon Laird, who was our number 2 then, believe it or not, because we had Adam Jorgensen, who was the Orange County Player of the Year. They both played short, and we decided it's Brandon's turn to start. And he's struggling. It's 2-2 in the 4th, and he walks a couple. And we bring in Adam, and he has a kid strike out, but the umpire doesn't call it. And the next pitch, he's number 8 hitter, hits it out. And we end up losing 5-3. But it's what we had planned. And the next year, we had Brandon Laird was our ace, and we had a kid lefty, Nick Capito. And we go down to Temecula Valley. And Nick throws 4 great innings. They get 1 run on bloop single, and they make the plays, and we bring in Brandon, even though Nick was doing fine. We brought in Brandon the last 3 innings. He struck out 9. We lose 1-0. Well, I got my assistants. Maybe we should. Guys, we did
You got to
exactly.
score.
Yeah, we did exactly. Yeah, that was the same. But we did exactly what we wanted to do, and we didn't win. And that's baseball. But you can't look back and go, I should have, I could have. When I first started coaching, there was a lot of that. Yeah. And that makes a difference.
Well, it's easy early on to beat yourself up, because I think you put so much ownership on yourself as a coach early on, and then eventually you realize it is about your players executing.
Well, we all sit in the stands, even at a major league game. Somebody gets thrown out or somebody doesn't do something, and it's like people ask me, what do you think? I go, well, first of all, I don't know his personnel. I don't know what they had in mind. I'm not, but why would you run so-and-so, and it's like, guys, I can't tell you because I don't know what's there. And, of course they want to criticize, it doesn't matter what level. It's the easiest game in the world. They're all easy, but to second guess. I mean, and when you bring the pitcher in,
I can't remember who it was. The GM actually the GM of GM at the time, the CEO of GM, and he had a great quote. He said, "Every job looks easy if you're not the one doing it."
Yeah, well, exactly, and yeah, I catch myself sometimes going, I wonder why, and then I realize I've been in it so much. I mean, I'll tell you one. This last year, I belonged to a country club, and Justin Upton playing for the Angels. And I mean, I don't know anything about John Madden, but all of a sudden he walked Seager with the bases loaded. And people asked me, and all I know is I saw the expression of Trout's face on the news. I can't answer that one. And then La Russa, 2 strikes on, I forgot who it was. He puts him on to face Muncy, bringing a left-hand pitcher, Muncy hits it out. I can't answer that, and sometimes they get away with it because they've had so much success. But
Joe Madden was that's probably the beginning of the end for Joe Madden with the Angels.
Well, exactly, and as I said, even the one with La Russa, it's like he has 2 strikes. So now you decide you're going to put him on and face the lefty with the lefty. But again, I'm not in the clubhouse. I'm not in, the bench coach. So,
you look at the amount of big leaguers you've had, what were some of the keys to coaching those guys? Did you know as soon as they walked on campus they were going to be good players, or how did those 4 years go with those guys?
Well, Bobby Crosby transferred his senior year and was a late bloomer. Grew about a foot. The year before, he played second base for a league rival and was DH for. And he came over, and that was the '98 team. We had Gerald Laird, who was probably as close of, you're pretty sure that this kid's going to play in the major leagues, that I had. Kids like Ian Stewart was unbelievable bat, big, strong left-hand hitter, and Ian Kenny was your 6-foot, very intelligent, but you never knew. It's funny, Ryan, you said that, because in '92 I helped with the 18 under USA team down in Mexico, the World Games, and our shortstop was 17-year-old Alex Rodriguez. And I learned in my coaching as like the first 10 years, I thought I had some pretty good players. And then as I said, I coached outside of LaQuinta quite a bit, and I see something and I go, wow, boy, that's another level. And same thing happened in the 80s. And when I saw Alex, I kind of went, that's just different.
Mine was Francisco Lindor, perfect game national.
There you go.
He was 15, 16 at the time. He looks like he looks now.
Yeah,
There's not much
and
difference between Francisco Lindor now and what he was at Perfect Game National when he was a sophomore.
it's interesting seeing. I had in '91, I had Nomar Garcia Parr and Aaron Boone on the West team in the Olympic Festival. Uh, Nomar had a pulled hammy, so he was kind of at 75%, and Aaron was still developing. But on that '92 team, our catcher was AJ Hinch, and he was older. He had graduated from high school, and his intelligence, and now you look at a catcher and what you need to be to make it to the big leagues. Like Gerald Laird he was an unbelievable athlete, and he hit 600 but his brother had more power, and his brother pitched. Gerald caught. He could play anywhere, and he could play any sport. So I felt because of his catching ability and his athletic ability that he was as sure of a person that I had at LaQuinta High. But yeah, then there's
Did you have to sit on those guys much in the 4 years you had them? I mean, did you have to sit on those guys much, or
no?
It's crazy how that works, isn't it?
I had Ian Stewart and Ian Kennedy at the same time. Obviously, Kennedy was the pitcher. It's so funny. We have people come up and go, "Hey, coach, is Ian Stewart pitching today?" I go, "You mean Ian Kennedy?" We had two Ians, and they would be, well, Ian Kennedy loved dirt bikes, surfing, and so from a pitching standpoint, he played on Team USA between his junior senior year, but he didn't want to play. And that's the problem with the high school pitchers, is the travel. He didn't do that. In fact, his Connie Mack team made it to the World Series. He didn't even play on my Connie Mack team, the one I coached, because he wanted to play with some friends down in San Diego. They made it to the Connie Mack World Series, and the coach calls me. He goes, "Coach, I need you to talk to Ian Kennedy." "What?" "Well, he's not going to go back to World Series because he wants to get ready to go to USC." So I called Ian, and I said, we had a good talk. I said, "Ian, we talk about commitment. Okay, you're going to have all the time in the world, and I'm going to tell you, you're going to love Farmington, New Mexico, and it's a great, great experience." But he was, he didn't pitch year round, and Ian Stewart, he'd play in a sandlot game if there was one, and that was fine because he was a hitter. And but that '03 team, Ian Stewart, Ian Kennedy, Cole Garner, if it wasn't for injuries, would have been the big leagues longer. And then Brandon Laird, he's been over in Japan. He's got over 200 home runs because he just didn't think he was going to get a chance with Houston or the Yankees. So at the time, no, I didn't know I had 4 major leaguers on one high school team. I mean, anybody could coach that.
With how you were laying the calendar out for your program, did it change much in 34 years? Did it evolve much?
How, what?
The program. So, like, when you're laying out the 12-month calendar for the program, did it change much over those years?
Oh, yeah, because when I first started out in the '70s, we didn't even have a 6-period class. Our district we didn't have a baseball class. So we actually couldn't even have any baseball. I coached basketball 8 years at LaQuinta. I love basketball, and I did lower levels and then finally, I think it was in '79, maybe my 5th or 6th years, they gave me a 6-period PE class, but CIF, we had a restriction. You couldn't coach outside of your 6th period. So the rest of the way, we only had a 6-period class in fall and winter. The year after, Ryan, I got out of coaching, '08, CIF made it year round. And now these coaches, I understand what they're doing, because if they don't do something in the fall and winter, the travel teams eat them up, and now they can get their kids and control them. But I'm telling you, these high schools play a season in the fall, a season in the winter, and then they get to their regular season.
And they're done earlier
crazy.
too. Yeah, California has a wild schedule. It does.
Yeah, you have the weather, but it's 24/7, and so people ask me. I said, well, if I did it, fall would be a lot of one-on-one instruction. Maybe in October we start playing a Saturday instructional type game, and if kids wanted to do a showcase then or whatever, and then after Christmas, we pick it up a little bit more, and everybody's going to be on board with me, not trying to go out and play on 2 or 3 teams. But yeah,
When you're
these
breaking,
programs.
you say you do individual stuff. I mean, where's the place you're going to start with those guys if you're doing individual work with them?
Well, I think you bring out, not all of them at once. I mean, you have your weight training, which, you've got to do 2 or 3 days a week. And you can do that after 6. You just can't have baseballs and whatever. So during fall, I'm sorry, it would be maybe a group hitting in the cages while you're working on your pitchers, first baseman feeding the pitchers, catchers blocking, base run, just the individual stuffs, a cutoff relay one day. And so you wouldn't have everybody. People, if you're working cutoff relays, you might have the bat, whatever in the cages, or if you're working with the outfielders, communication, you might have the infielders in the cages or whatever. So I think
Hey, being an outfielder, how long did it take you to kind of get acclimated to teaching some of the other sides and other positions and all of that? How long did it take you to get acclimated coming from the outfield side to now having a coach?
Well, I had played the infield a long time, so I had infield. Where I was really, and I was fortunate because Mike Main's son Brent, but when I first started out, Brent wasn't around, is learning the catching and pitching. I always, and I try to tell these high school coaches, don't try to do the whole thing.
Yeah.
I always had an outstanding pitching coach, someone I played with, someone with a pitching background. And then I would learn it when I was out there. When I did USA baseball, I did the pitching. But at LaQuinta High, I never did the pitching. And I had 4 or 5 really good pitching coaches. I'd have 2 or 3 other coaches, and I coached third every single season. And I'd make the lineup, I'd make the pitching change. But we had people, infield guys, outfield guys, break into groups, hitting groups. And it wasn't always my way. A lot of them already knew what I wanted. And when you only have 13 or 14 kids, we had it down pat. I mean, I could have started practice and gone down to the other field and hit my 9-iron. I mean, I got that from my first basketball coach. I mean, it was so structured. And in 2002, we actually cut out one of our programs because we just didn't have enough kids. So our JVs would come down with us, and we would implement them in to the program, the practice schedule. And it made it nice because before you get to the summer, now you got your JV kids and you're returning varsity. And a lot of times things were new. Well, this way I actually had my JV and varsity practicing every day, each with 13 or 14 guys, which is only 26, 28 guys. So
that's like at the convention when I was coaching, or if I was at a camp or somewhere, an event, I would try to hang out with the guys of the positions that I didn't coach. So I spent a lot of time with the pitching guys, trying to pick things up. It's funny though, I picked a lot of throwing program stuff up that I would implement with the position players by talking to pitching coaches.
Well, I tell you what, 2 of the best were Mike Gillespie and John Savage, who's a really good friend of mine. And it's kind of like teaching the pitching. And again, that's the one area I find high schools kids are taking private, if they're taking private pitching and hitting lessons, you like to know with who, so you can get them on the same page and so forth. And pitching, you will really try to limit, Ian Kennedy, his senior year, of course, the Angel Scout team Wednesday night played at Angel Stadium. And he was asked to play on that. We always played Saturday. And I said, Ian, you have 2 choices. You can pitch Wednesday night for an inning, and then Saturday you're just going to play first base, outfield, and hit. And maybe we'll throw a light pin. Or you just play with us on Saturday. And he said, I'd rather play with you on Saturday. So that's kind of what you got to see, because you find out this kid pitched here, then you don't know about
Well, and
the
that's
private lessons.
communication too. I mean, you talked about communication with your players. Like that's communication with the players if he's on multiple teams or the parents. That's where everybody that's involved with that player, you just have to get open lines of communication go so things like that don't
It
happen.
Yeah, it's Ryan. I don't think the kids have changed. I don't
I
think
don't
the
either.
coaches
I don't either.
have. It's the ones that run it is the parents. I'm glad I grew up when I did because things were structured. Just you played that season, you didn't have the extra. I don't think my dad would have sent me to and maybe he would have. I don't know. I enjoyed the playtime, but it's I can talk to 100 parents, and I do this, and I'll have all of them. Hey, coach, I agree. Oh, yeah, you're so right. But then they'll turn right around,
Yes.
and their kids are involved.
Their actions don't
Especially,
match their words.
yeah, it's like they think they're missing out, and it's like, well, you know what? I'll tell you what. If your kid goes to high school and he's the best athlete in that school, and he wants to play football, basketball, baseball, I guarantee you, those coaches are going to work it out.
They'll let him.
Oh,
They'll let him.
yeah, it's like the 4 or 5 schools in this Orange County. Orange County's got 85 schools, and it's like they got 80 guys, and it's the sport's just not made. It's not like football, basketball where you can run kids in and on to the kickoff team or for a few minutes basketball. I mean, it's hard. But I can't say I ever did it. And we didn't have 13 and 14 because that was the rule. That's just the way things fell for me at LaQuinta.
You said you did it backwards. Was it refreshing going to be an assistant for you?
Well, actually, when I hit that 34th year of the teaching part, I found myself, and when I say 34 years, that's 25 years of Connie Mack plus coaching all over the world. So I was nonstop. And I found myself kind of stagnant, and things that LaQuinta had really changed a lot. And we were still, my pitching coach, he had 3 unbelievable sons that all played pro ball coming in, and we would have still been very good. But the whole thing, I didn't want to teach and not coach. I didn't want to coach and not teach. And I thought I wanted to get out and see some of the other levels. And, I went over with Scott, and then I helped 2 very good high school programs. So for 8 years, I enjoyed the assistant role, and I didn't have any trouble with the assistant role at all because they were good programs. And the
And
last
you
8
knew it was
years,
time too. I think that's a difference. Like you
well,
ended on your own terms. So
well, it was I will never forget, and it's a sad kind of example, but I grew up in Palos Verdes, and El Segundo had this coach, John Stevenson, coached 52 years and has the overall California record, 1,100 wins. And okay, fine. Actually, I played against El Segundo. Then I had a coach against John, and he was kind of a grumpy old man and this and that. And when we became a prominent program, I'm going, geez, I mean, I still had him in the utmost respect, him and Jim O'Brien, who's in the Hall of Fame. He was at North Torrance and a couple others. But I get out, and right away I get this coach. God, if you just did another 6, 8, 10 years, you'd have the win record. I go, really? Well, in 2008, John, or 2008 or 10 or 11 or something, he walks out of a Westchester restaurant and has a heart attack. And there I am at his funeral. Yeah. And I'm thinking, next person that ever, says that, I said, we won 78%. Yeah, that's a lot better than El Segundo. But John's the whole life, and there's lifers out there that, Scott Pickler will coach, and Scott doesn't hunt. He doesn't fish. He doesn't play golf.
I saw him this summer.
And when he went from a head to assistant, we had a lot of, he really communicated because it was tough, but he understood. And I think now he just sees the way things are, that this is better than not coaching at all. And he feels, and I may say this at the banquet, the day that they, which they should anyway, name that field Scott Pickler Field, I'll be there, because I wouldn't be getting this honor if he didn't do the resume and do whatever he did to get me in. And but he reminds me of myself a lot. He's a perfectionist, and he loves it. I could not believe he coaches at Cypress and goes to Cape. That ends. He goes back to Cyprus, and I asked one of his assistants who helped him at the Cape. I said, "Well, is he more relaxed at the Cape?" He goes, "Are you kidding?"
Nope.
He not only does the offense, he does the pitching. Yep. And I've been back there. I stayed with him a week at the end of one season.
Early work. He was right in the cage with those guys for early work. The game I went to this summer, he was banging away on those guys for early work. I loved it.
Well, Sharon was gone, and so we're there, and he's on the phone because guys are leaving, guys are coming in, they're getting ready for the playoffs. He's 24/7, and I mean, he doesn't have a break between the Cape and Cyprus. He does now, because Sharon would string him out, but he goes right into it, and he loves it, and he loves working with hitters, and of course he's got his son in the big league. So
yeah, that's awesome. Hey, what do you? When did you find golf?
Well, that's a really my dad was a big avid golfer. In fact, I was born in Cleveland. Thank God I shouldn't say that. When my dad got moved when I was 5, and so everybody thought I was from Palos Verdes, but I was born in Cleveland, and I do remember my dad always talking about Lakewood Country Club. Even as a young kid, I remember Lakewood. Then when we moved to Palos Verdes, he was golfing all the time. I just didn't, I don't know, it's something, maybe that wish of, gosh, playing a sport where the ball just sits there and isn't thrown at your head or curves, and I still can't hit it, pissed me off. I don't know. But I just really didn't take it up until about 10, 12 years ago. We got a country club. Gosh, I've lived in my house since 1979, and when I went to join this country club, I actually drove right by it because it's in a neighborhood. And now I play 4 days a week in the morning, like I played this morning. And I'm very average, but it's a great exercise because I always walk.
So it's a great game. I love it. I hardly get to play, but I love playing. Same thing. I didn't like playing early on. A lot of that had to do with my dad and brother and having to play with them. So I would get frustrated and end up quitting. But now that I'm older, I do love the game, even though I don't get to play much.
Yeah, I kid the people there, because I come up after 18, they go, "Hey, coach, how was your round?" I go, "Well, it's a good exercise day," and they laugh. And it was funny because in 2018, a girlfriend, we went back to Cleveland. We did the Cleveland, Niagara Falls, U.S. Open because she's a tennis player, and we went the whole route, Cooperstown. Well, so we go into Cleveland. We stay right by the Rock and Roll. We go to there that day. That night, Ian Kennedy's in town with the Royals. They play the Indians. We go to the game. And the next day, we go to both houses in Fairview and Rocky River, where I grew up. And I don't remember Fairview too much, except for a couple pictures. I know it's a long backyard. But Rocky River, I did. And so we were on our way to go down to Niagara Falls. So we're going through the town of Rocky River. And all of a sudden, there's a sign, Lakewood Country Club. I went, "Oh, my God." And she goes, "What's wrong?" I go, that's my dad. That's where he spent most outside of work. I go, "Lakewood Country Club." She goes, "How'd you remember that?" I said, "I don't know." Well, we didn't go visit it, but it was like, wow.
Hey, do you have a fail forward moment? Do you have a fail forward moment? Do you have something that you thought was going to sidetrack you along the way, but looking back now was one of the best things that happened to you?
Well, I think I can always say that I definitely right place at the right time. And when I went to Cleveland, I realized that things would have been just fine if I would have grown up there. I would have got used to the snow, but I don't know if you've ever been to Palos Verdes Estates in California. To grow up there, and actually, we were one of the first houses, and the school was built like 4 years, 5 years after we moved there, 2 blocks away. And it was just a great school to go to. And then when I decided on the college, I decided on Long Beach State because they were going to let me do both basketball, baseball. But then Tarkanian came in, and I still would have kept my scholarship, but I just saw not much playing time till junior, senior year. So I focused on baseball. And then when I was almost like, okay, what am I going to do now? If I don't take that plane ticket to Walla, which I really, Ryan, it was weird. It was like I felt like I really didn't want to play anymore. And next thing you know, I get the job at LaQuinta. And it's like, wow, that turned out to be real fortunate. And then all the stuff I got out of it, coaching out around the country, the Connie Mac, the World Series, the different countries, just because of LaQuinta. And then LaQuinta itself, I just, been in the right place at the right time. And then when I got out of coaching, someone goes, "Do you miss it?" I said, "I don't miss being the head coach. I just felt like it was time, just like I felt like it was time to move on from playing to coaching." So
how do you know when to listen to that voice? Because I think you have your inner dialogue. How do you know when it's time to listen to that inner dialogue that's telling you it's time to make a change?
Yeah, I don't know why all of a sudden, okay, you grow up going to be a baseball player. And I had a good college career. And I'm thinking, am I supposed to take this one plane ticket or move on to coaching, which I didn't even think about? I mean, I took the class that you needed, and I made the right choice. I didn't look back. I didn't, I might have been a AAA player, AA player, and then this would never have happened. And then when I stopped teaching, coaching at the same time, 34 years, I mean, today that's a lot at one school. Then I helped out at different schools. I enjoyed the assistant part. And now I enjoy the kind of the mentoring, just helping. I got my ex-players calling me now because now they're coaching at different levels. And I enjoy that. And you can't, I didn't
I think the key is to not,
area.
like, you're not going to know. I think the key of it is, like, you have to make decisions and then live with them and do not look back and, like, don't regret. Because, like, I think that your perception, I think, is going to change whether what happens in the future is good or bad. So I think the key is to, like, make that decision, rip the Band-Aid off, and then live with it and do not look back and, like, keep pushing forward.
And I was always fortunate where I made the decision. It wasn't made for me. And that was important. Now, like I said, moving to Palos Verdes, living in a great area and a great high school, well, that wasn't my decision. But, I still talk to my brother the other day and go, "Hey, Dad's work was over by LAX. How can we move to Palos Verdes? That's a long drive." He goes, I really don't know. And then, like I said, choosing Long Beach State, that worked out great. And then I had nothing to do with I didn't even apply. I just was told, "Would you want this?" And I had that connection. So, and getting out of coaching, the head coaching job, I was just ready to do it. And it's kind of one of those, I went out on top, and I didn't wait for maybe my lack of effort to hurt the program. Not that I would have, but, and we still were going to be good. They were for a couple of years until it kind of fell apart. But
I read this quote the other day. It said, "It's best to leave when your ratings are high."
Well, it's like Satchel Paige, where it says, what do you say? I ain't ever had a job. I just played baseball." And that's how he said it too. I ain't ever, not never. I ain't ever had a job. I just played baseball. Well, and what's funny is, and my friends, my girlfriend would tell you, I have no handyman skills.
I don't either.
I don't know. I mean, my garage doesn't have tools and this and that. I have an older brother, sister that went different directions. They weren't, the same. And as I said, I think my dad loved me the best because he was a big time sports guy in high school, college, and So he kind of lived. But what's kind of sad is my mom and dad were great supporters, but neither one ever saw me coach a game because my mom passed away between my senior year in college in an accident, and then my dad remarried, moved up north, got cancer, and so they never saw me coach. And you know what? I look back and it never bothered me because they kind of had me to where I could move on by myself. But I was happy for my dad remarrying, me up north. I was sad about my mom, and I was sad about him. But um, yeah, I mean, I think I'm one of the most fortunate people, and I don't look back on any decision and go, what if?
Love it. What are some final thoughts, or if there's something I should have asked you that I didn't?
Um, Gosh, I think you cover about it. I've been very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time, and I learned a long time ago in life it's very important you surround yourself with the right people, and I've always been able to do that. And I always had my own philosophy that I think academics teach you education, but sports teach you life lessons. And I can't tell you how many different life lessons I've learned. And I see that because the people I've been closest to were my coaches and now my players. Those are the ones that are still kind of in my life. But the coaches I've been around and the players I've been around are really the ones I have going forward to however long it is. So, not everybody can say that, because you get out in different business worlds and so forth.
And I disagree with you. I know you feel like you've gotten some luck, but I think you create your opportunities, and which creates maybe luck for you. But I think as a person, I think you create your opportunities with how you approach it on a daily basis.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, there's times where you go, well, what would have happened if I did this or that? Well, I'm one of those, like I told you about later on coaching, going into big games where I never look back after a game. I never, I mean, where I maybe second guess early on coaching where I should have. You prepare yourself, and you're not always going to come out on top. But I look back at the big decisions I've made, and what if we would have never moved from Cleveland?
Yeah, but you'd be doing something great out there.
Well, what's amazing is the second house, Rocky River High School now is like right down the street from it. Not that I would have been Rocky River High School coach, but yeah, I mean, like I said, I think the religious part. I just think things are meant to be. They're going to be, and I have no complaints. And boy, what if I would have done this or done that, or and I got to make my own decisions as I move forward, and
that's
not
a big
somebody
one.
else make them for me.
Taking ownership and taking ownership of your decisions. I think that's a huge one too.
Well, I appreciate it. And I tell you,
yeah, Dave, thanks for your time. I appreciate you taking the time. I'm looking forward to seeing you in Nashville.
Okay, well, go get that daughter of yours.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Ryan.